all protocols observed. And in particular, I would like to recognize Governor Raful, Professor Liverpool, Master Artist, Master Leroy Clark, and the distinguished boys of the Queen's Royal College. Before I begin, I want to call upon Ms. Lorraine Johnson and Dr. Chris Rampasad to partner with the National University. I would like to remind the boys of Queen's Royal College who are sitting there with their famous history teacher who is at the back, who is known nationally at secondary schools where CAPE is pursued in history as Mad Mackenzie. And the boys know that because she is a radical history teacher. Radical. They find it very hard to find the things she is teaching in the classroom in any textbook, unless you have access to the West Indiana collection at the University of the West Indies. She is a radical thinker, and the boys at QRC, they are very lucky. Listening to Dr. Rampasad and Ms. Lorraine Johnson, I would like to remind everyone that we are on the site of what was called the Prince's Grounds. And boys, this is where QRC boys would come to school, on the Prince's Ground, while that building was being constructed, which is now called QRC. So you are home. And if you pay attention to the National Museum, which is our neighbor, and instead of just walking through the door today, I invite you to look upwards. And you would see over the doors on the southern side and on the eastern side of the building. It is called the Victoria Institute of Arts and Craft. It is a place of learning. It is an institute of learning. These grounds are sacred grounds, and they have always been used for light and education. So I would like to ask Dr. Chris Rampasad and Ms. Lorraine Johnson to invite me to come to visit the museum officially, because Professor Chogdas is aware that UTT is in possession of a large archaeological collection. And the museum is aware, they are nodding, that their collection remains incomplete without my pieces. And without partnering with me, I will not surrender my pieces to you. I really want to partner with you, Dr. Rampasad and Ms. Johnson. And I want my collection to be housed in your building in partnership with you. Art presents a perspective, an unnoticed, an uncommon angle or a view, or takes a position on an issue that is contrary to our everyday encounters, one that contravenes our normal approach to an object, event, or life form. This is why the secessionists, like Gustav Klimt, painted the woman as she is, not as men would want her to be in their desires or their dreams. Klimt glorified her as she is in our homes every day. He celebrated her body in the privacy of her home. His work, like the work of Clark, his work was rejected, and he was marginalized by all strata of society in Vienna at a time when the world looked upon Berlin and Paris for culture. Klimt was alive and painting in Vienna at a time when Adolf Hitler applied to be a student at the Academy of Fine Arts. On both occasions, he was rejected. Hitler went on to do other things in the world. But Klimt, along with the men of Vienna, changed the world, as Leroy seeks to change the Caribbean mindscape. At the time of Klimt, we had Ludwig Wittgenstein writing his philosophy, Sigmund Freud creating his topography of the human psyche, and Gustav Mahler composing. Later on in England, some of the Pre-Raphaelites followed Klimt, but not all of the painters in the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood followed Klimt closely. Rossetti continued to paint the woman as men would want to have her, but Jean-Everett Millet painted an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary that was considered a blasphemy in England. The painting entitled Christ in the House of His Parents made Our Lady of Exile seem ordinary, like all other women, plain and hardworking. Master Clark, like Fanon, Franz Fanon in his Wretched of the Earth, and Amy Césaire, and Wilfredo Lam from Cuba. Master Clark, like these great minds of our Caribbean, is a painter and a poet. He is, in my view, Master Clark, if I may have a view of you, he is, in my view, a mirror maker. And in the house of his mirrors, the images that we see in these mirrors are not distortions, but they do repress what we already know to be true and amplify what we choose to sublimate or to take a detour away from. I want to share with the boys of QRC an encounter I had with Leroy Clark when I was just your age. Leroy came back from New York with his duendes, and I met him, just like you, in a school uniform at the old abandoned Teachers College in Port of Spain. And I questioned Leroy, and he took a program and he wrote some stuff on it. I put that program in a box in a bank with my stamp collection and coin collection, and I went off to study. When I came back from Cambridge, I set out to find him. So I turned up at his house in Honolulu, and I gave him this piece of paper. He couldn't recognize me. He couldn't remember I was that schoolboy. And he invited me into his home. And when I was leaving through the kitchen, he called me back and he gave me a big pumpkin from his estate. And he said to me, "Never say that I gave you nothing." Another day, Leroy had a need for a drop back home from the University of the West Indies after teaching his class. And I would be in my office near where he was teaching. So he asked me for a drop. It was very exciting for someone like Leroy Clark to ask me for a drop. So we jumped in the car and we were driving towards Port of Spain. So he said to me, let us stop and look at the Brian Lara promenade. When we arrived at the promenade, we came out and we started to look around. It was about to be completed. He said to me, are you seeing the Trojan horse? And I remember saying to him, I can't see any horse. I know the story of Helen of Troy, but I am not seeing the horse, Leroy. He said, look at this. They have built this to call the people here to assemble in this space to be surrounded by their plunderers. And he continued to call out the names of the plunderers. I would not call them. You need just to walk around the promenade and you would see them. I'm sharing this with you because he is not an ordinary person. The only library that can compare to his library with a collection of books on philosophy would be the library at Mount St. Benedict. Not even the UWI library would have texts in philosophy to compare to the texts in his library. So the boys of QRC, I ask you to treasure this moment and to interact richly with Mr. Clark, with Dr. Clark. The present body of work is confronting the things we don't want to have a conversation about. The works are silences. Silences like the silences of Elizabeth, the Queen of England, who keeps her opinions to herself on matters related to Cuba, Ukraine, Syria, Scotland. These works are loud silences on Haiti. They are protestations in public with hands and feet tied, blindfolded and gagged. Perhaps one day, Dr. Clark, perhaps one day someone will paint the buckling down of the hatches and the screams from the holes in the Fat El Razak. Perhaps someone will paint the processing of the immigrants on Nelson Island. Perhaps one day someone will paint the sweepers dusting the concrete platform on Nelson Island where Christians, Jews, Muslims, and Hindus were cremated and swept into the sea. This is art to confront, to bring out of concealedness, to provide a perspective on opinions normally kept to ourselves. Turner glorified slavery with his slave ship in 1840, 7 years after the abolition of British slavery in the West Indies in 1833. The painting was in the possession of John Ruskin, a Victorian art critic. This painting was then sent to Boston to add against the protest of slavery in the United States, which came to an end only with the American Civil War. This painting had one use in one continent and quite another on another side of the Atlantic. I hope that today and well into the future of Trinidad and Tobago, we seek to find the courage to look at and into the mirrors of Dr. Leroy Clark. On behalf of the Ministry of National Diversity and Social Integration and MTES, and the governors of the board of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, I wish you all the best today at this symposium. Thank you.